There's some of these ridiculous ones. Hey, for those watching, we're a couple minutes early, 30 seconds early, so hang with us. We're waiting for a couple people, and we'll get started here real quick. Worst golf movie ever?
Worst golf movie ever?
Yep.
It's got to be a sequel. I think you know where I'm heading with that one. Caddyshack 2. I mean, you started off really strong with the first one. It's hard to top it. Is part of the problem on that one. You change that up? Anything different?
I like this question here too. No, that's fine. That was a pretty terrible movie. Who wins in a cage fight? Brad, Dustin Johnson, or John Rahm? What do you guys think?
I'll give you my opinion.
John Rahm is a big boy.
Is it happening this very day? Because I'm liking my chances against DJ today.
Well, yeah, maybe today. That's not happening.
We gotta set the rules too.
Anyway, thanks for joining us. Live Q&A. I think we've done this one other time, but if not, welcome. Here we are. So, whatever questions you do want to ask, please feel free to ask. Here's what I'd say about GOLFTEC though. If any golfer could drop 7 shots just by taking a pill, that would be like a $20 billion industry. But that's what we offer the average student who comes to see us for help. So if you're interested in getting better at golf, GOLFTEC is the place to go. So how about you want to start with one of these questions that came in, and I don't see it on here yet, but we've already hit a shot that I wanted to look at because someone did ask me a question on social media. It was, how can I hit a shot with the face closed to the path? So for reference, you've got the face angle itself where the ball takes off mainly. That's the biggest predominant factor there. And then the path you can swing the club on. Well, how can I swing with the face angle closed to the path, which would for a right-handed golfer be a draw, but I actually hit a bad slice? So that was the question. Is that right?
Yep.
Do you actually know the answer?
Well, there's a number of ways that could happen. Yep. I think the easiest explanation is going to be with the driver and gear effect.
Sure. So yes, gear effect is the first answer. Let me pop this up on the screen.
Yep, and then while Nick's getting set up in there, if you don't know what gear effect is, it's just going to be whenever you hit a shot, and then say the center of gravity of the golf ball doesn't align with the face, or you just hit it off center, the club head's going to twist one direction, and the golf ball tends to rotate the other way. So Nick already has a shot up on the screen kind of demonstrating that. I think he can walk through exactly what we're looking at as well.
Yeah, so Eric, I'd just throw this shot up here. So here's the shot. I'm playing on the 9th hole at the Tuxedo Club, which is a lot of fun because I used to work here. And there's a little road and out of bounds down here on the left-hand side. This shot started to the left, curved to the right, and it went down the range maybe a couple hundred yards. You can see that over here on the far right-hand side. This is where the ball's actually at. Now let's take a look at what actually happened. So driving into this data, this is what's interesting. So first I might start with what happened. So my swing direction, my club path was 3.4 degrees into out to the right of the target, and the face angle was closed 1.5 degrees to that path. This, on a really good hit, is pretty typical of how I try to play. I'm trying to swing it basically a 4-degree club path and a 2-degree open face or something very nearly. But you notice how this ball started, even though the face was open to the target about 2 degrees, the ball started almost 5 degrees to the left. And then the side spin number, which is measured in here just to have a way of referencing which way the ball curved, shows that it curved some RPMs to the right. And then here's a little portrayal of how that tilted shot actually took off. Now, how did this happen? Well, here's the answer. It's really where I hit the ball on the club face in gear effect. So there's some amount of twisting that the club actually has because the center of gravity of the club is closer to the middle. So when I hit this shot, the club twists, the ball twists the other direction, and even though my face is closed to the path, it curves to the right. And I get a really bad shot like that one. So I find that one really interesting, and then the other way that this can happen. I've seen too many people who have done this already, so let me join the crowd. Chopping up some golf balls. Can you get a good close-up of that one there, Scott? So one of the ways that this could also happen too is if you had a golf ball that didn't have the core in the middle of the ball. So I'm not trying to say that there are bad golf ball companies out there or bad golf balls in general, but this is part of the problem there. So we chopped up this golf ball. I won't even bother with the vendor, but all the rest of them have looked pretty good. This one happens to just not be in the center of the actual golf ball. So there is a certain amount of wobbling there. And I've done enough testing with TrackMan now, putting as well, that this is actually a big deal. So get good golf balls, I think, is the good start to that. What I'm really describing is that sometimes I hit a putt with TrackMan with everything pretty much set up the same way, almost like a robot test would be. And I get a result that is nothing that looks like it should. So spend some money, get a good ball fitting, get good golf balls. Don't just play the ones that you find in a pond and you shovel them out with your ball retriever. That's not a good way to play golf.
It's the most important 15th club in your bag, though.
Yeah, that's right. That about covers that one for an earlier question. Anything else on here? How about you two are expert club fitters. What clubs do you play? You want to go first?
Yeah, so the irons I'm playing this year, just the Apex from Callaway. Typically what I'm looking for in an iron, I'd like something a little bit bigger. So I like the Apex because top line's a little thick, the sole's also a little bit thicker as well, but the heel to toe is still pretty short. So it has a blade-ish profile, but still it's super forgiving and it goes really far. That's just makes the game so much easier and a lot more fun, comparing that to like just a straight blade where the top of that thing's like a butter knife. Yeah. Some people say it instills confidence. It does the exact opposite to me though. So.
Well, that should say something about your game.
Hey.
How about driver, fairway woods?
Drivers, Callaway's Epic Flash as well too. Tested all of them, and they're all good. They're all for certain people, but that's just the one that I was able to keep my spin really low. So the Sub-Zero model kept my spin really low, under 3,000, even on like a pretty poorly struck shot. And still, it's forgiving enough. I mean, they're all so forgiving anymore. It's hard to go wrong, but that's why it's important just to do a fit and obviously hit them all, see what's best for you. Yep,
I'm going with all TaylorMade stuff, an M6 driver that I don't get to use enough, 44.5-inch shaft, M5 3-wood, M5 irons, and those are fun because I do hit the pitching wedge about 200 yards in elevation, so it's made gapping quite tricky. But I can also hit a 7-iron about 250 yards, so the courses just play really short. It's been a fun way to try to play golf and see how much this new tech can even change the way I might just try to play. So I play like once a year maybe, so it's not a seriously big deal to me, but it's been a fun experiment to do that.
Yeah, moving to the Apexes this year has been a little problematic. I've flown a lot of greens because they do go so much farther, so problem, but a good problem to have.
Yeah, okay, well let's keep going on this one. I like that one. Who wins in a cage fight? I'm still going with John Rahm.
I've at least got Dustin Johnson. I've got second place wrapped up.
For now.
You need to define the rules still, then we'll talk.
Where should I play the ball position when using a number 4 hybrid, Bradford?
Play it very similarly to the equivalent iron for starters, so favoring just the front of your stance, so say middle of your stance, and then maybe 2 to 3 balls more forward than that. Try to position it just ever so slightly behind where your low point is going to be.
Okay.
Don't need to overcomplicate that one.
No, there's no real certain recipe, although I would say if you're going to make a mistake on that, if you're really struggling with it, playing it further back is not the worst thing.
Yeah.
Chances are if you're struggling to hit it 4 hybrid, it's not the ball position, it's actually your swing technique. That's what coaches
the ball's on the ground, airing too far back, the better of the 2 options.
Can you read this one from, I think it's VCAS?
Throw it down here. So I need to try to fix my wrists. I generate a little bit of shaft lean, but my hands are at my rear leg and instead of my lead leg. What are some drills and swing thoughts to get the wrists fixed?
Sure.
So it sounds like he has a little bit of shaft lean, but he feels like his hands are too far behind the ball when he does hit. It's causing him some problems out in the course.
Needs a little bit more. Okay, so you and about a mountain of other people who play golf need this exact same help. So let me go ahead and try to explain a couple different ways that we might be able to do this one. So first, let me use just that measurement that's up there of shoulder bend. So out of all those numbers that you can see, we'll take a look at that one here. Now let me hit a shot. So the example that you're describing is hitting the golf ball, maybe with your hips further away from the target than you really want to have them, but hitting the turf behind the ball is a common problem as a result, but not having the butt end of the club far enough toward the target to actually control where you're going to hit the ground. It's really challenging to hit the ball first when the shaft leans backward. Not impossible. I hit a bunch of pitch shots that way all the time. So if you wanted to learn how to hit the ground in front of the ball every time, a good place to start would be just learning the skill of how to have the butt end of the club in front of the ball, and preferentially even over the top of the middle of your left thigh when you hit a shot. And a lot of people struggle with that. So what's happening as you get near the golf ball, your left wrist starts to extend too soon and too many degrees, and suddenly you're using this club like a pair of scissors, and how you would squeeze the handles together, pull them apart, and then that would influence how the club head's actually moving. So the first place to start on something like that would be to make the shortest backswing you can. So the butt end of the club, when I did that one, can you just pull up that shoulder bend number, Brad? The butt end of the club from address until I reach what the top of my backswing is going to be really hasn't moved at all. If anything, it's moved maybe 1 inch to the right. That's it. So this part of the club is barely moved away from the target at all. Then punch the ground and do something that resembles a follow through, and let's talk about how that works. Okay, so check this one out. Can you go right to just like the top of the swing is fine. So there's the butt end of the club. It's moved a couple of inches. I'd suggest not moving it very much. Then when I hit, you'll see the shaft is leaning forward. That's not the most important skill in all of this yet, but that's a good demo of just how to do it. And then can you go up to about 8, right arm parallel to the ground. So my right humerus is parallel to the ground right here, and you might notice the amount that my shoulders are bent backward. 24 degrees is that number. So let's go live one more time. Arms are straight, shoulders are bent backward 24 degrees like this. What most people do and what they struggle with the most to learn this skill and how to keep the shaft forward is they hit the shot and then through the ball start to flex their elbows, extend your left wrist like that, and stay bent forward through the shot. So instead of the 24 degrees forward, I'd start learning just how not to be, or backward, I would start by just learning how not to be forward when you hit. So I'm just using this front view camera as a way of looking at that dimension in golf. But if you hit this, and first you pull your arms too far apart, you move the butt end of the club too much towards you, it makes it very challenging to lean the shaft forward. It's almost as if you're hitting the ball like a putter already. So that's a big problem in the backswing. But starting really small, isolating how much your wrists are actually bent, hitting the shot, bending yourself backward, that's the start to not hitting the ground in the wrong spot and leaning the shaft forward. When you can do that okay, I'd recommend try to move the butt end of the club 2 inches to the right, which will actually look something like this for most people, and do the exact same thing, just punching the ball and stopping early on in your or in your follow through with your shoulder bent backward like you see mine on the front view camera there, about 30 degrees back. From there you can hit harder, but anytime you struggle and you see or you take a picture of your swing and you see the same problem, again, you need to start by just going back to your basics and hit some more shots or make a bunch of practice swings with that tiny, tiny part of the swing. That one's just hard for everyone because it's such an invasive and complicated part of the swing where a lot of things are moving very fast at the same time. So we have to really shrink it down to the smallest common denominator to get better at that.
Why don't you stay up there?
Okay.
A couple,
what else you got?
A couple related questions here, really. So for starters, how do I remedy a negative back bend at the top of the at the top of the golf swing? So I'm assuming bent backward too many degrees.
Sure.
And then 2 follow-up questions from some other people out there. How do I get to my front foot rather than stay on my back foot in a normal swing? So I think those will be related. And then another weight shift question of golfer keeping their weight, their back foot flat in the ground, and even sounds like chunking their driver, which they say is embarrassing, which I totally understand.
That's not good. Can you realign me here, and then let's talk about the backward bend.
Sure.
So out of all the PGA Tour players that we've measured, at the top of their swing, that shoulder bend number that you see that's up on the screen, especially from the front view, that's the one that is easiest for you to see, reads about 1 degree back, 0, 1 forward, depending on how much I move. That's this shoulder sensor that I have right here, and the angle either forward or backward. Same conversation we just had about the follow-through before. At the top of the swing, out of the couple hundred PGA Tour players that we've measured, and then a bunch of my friends have measured them on more complicated 3D systems where you've got 12 or 10 or 12 of these sensors on at the same time, that number at the top of the swing is actually pretty close to 0 for everyone that I've actually measured too. So even here I'm measuring at about 3 degrees forward. Turn a little bit more, there's close to 0. So I would suggest bringing that number to 0, like how I'm standing right now, while you're actually turning and while you tilt your shoulders to the left. And that's what you see in golfers. That's what a backswing actually looks like when you break them all up together. I wouldn't say you need to go backward. Going any more back than that is necessary for a driver. If you want to hit it higher, farther, have a longer swing, the more you bend your shoulders backward from forward to back, the easier it is to make a longer swing. And if I were trying to hit the ball as far as I could, like when Brad does his long drive contest, I would actually try to move my shoulder bend back closer to 10 to 20 degrees backward. That amount just lets me keep moving my left arm higher and higher into the air, make a longer swing, give me the chance to swing faster. To say that you have too many degrees backward bend, I think is a misunderstanding at best and a total fallacy at worst. So first, I'm suggesting you can make a backswing and move your shoulder bend back 10 or 15 degrees past where I'm standing right now, and you're not going to hurt yourself. There's no repercussions to that. It's a common idea that there is, but I would just challenge that with whatever evidence someone thinks they can find about that. It doesn't really exist, especially at the top of your swing when you're moving the very slowest you're going to in your entire swing. To be worried about how much you're bent backward from the very top of your thoracic spine is a total waste of time. Now, if a lot of people misconstrue this point too. So I think when you see shoulder bends that are too far back, or if you feel like yours are too far back.
So I was thinking typically people, maybe they would have too many degrees of backward bend, just say theoretically they do.
Sure.
Were you thinking typically that's an error in how they're doing their hip sway most of the time?
So generally
we'll
that
need to go back
starts
to
to be...
address, just get some lines on you. Make
Okay,
it easier.
gotcha. Yeah, you want to draw that one up?
Yep.
So as an example, where I see the most people have issues with their shoulder bend is not so much with the backward bending itself, it's with the backswing when you move your whole pelvis to the right, going through that red line that Brad drew. Then bending backward becomes much easier to do, and you can start going way past that zero that I'm suggesting. You know, I am just suggesting do zero, but I'm also saying there's not repercussions with doing more. But that tends to be a hip sway piece. So if I make a backswing, move my pelvis to the right for too long and bend backward, I think that's what commonly people are seeing. But the fix for someone like that is just to actually learn how to move the center of your pelvis ever so slightly toward the target in the backswing. Then bending backward the past 10 degrees really isn't something that's an actual real thing.
Yeah, so typically people that maybe do have too many degrees backward bend, it's usually rooted more in their hip sway.
It's always a hip sway problem,
Yep.
moving it too far away.
And then for those players then that we're describing here, having problems, say, shifting their weight when they hit.
So this was follow-through part?
Yeah, but I think a lot of them it's simply because their hip sway moves too far away
Sure.
in their backswing.
Yeah.
So then it's just way too much work for them when it ultimately comes time to hit the ball.
Yep, that first motion measurement study we ever did that we called just Swing True showed that one of the biggest separators of skill, and I still think it's the biggest when you do the correlation coefficients of each, was the hip sway. So can you pull that one out just as an example? Because that one's about right. The PGA Tour average is 3.9 inches towards, so right about here at the top of the swing. But most people who struggle with hitting the ground in the wrong spot or don't have enough hip sway when they hit actually struggle quite a bit with how much they move away in the backswing. So by starting with every swing that I make, I can measure that. Like right now, I'm reading 2.3 inches away or so with that medallion that's pulled out. The PGA Tour average is 3.9 inches towards. That's what I would do, is just the PGA Tour average. And if you wanted to really make a mistake, it would be to move your hip sway even a little more toward than that, so you could start hitting the ground in the right place. But all the people that we see you hit, and I think your question that popped up there was, I hit and I've got my weight all the way on my back foot. Well, if you want to stop doing that, I could tell you just start with your right foot on the ground, but banked in like I have it. Feel like your weight is almost all the way toward the target as far as you can go, and then just don't move back. Try to always keep it moving forward. At least then you could start learning how to not place a bunch of weight into your trail foot like that.
And even there, even if they didn't move their hips anymore towards the target when they actually hit, they can just learn to almost stay in the same spot.
Yeah.
Typically, you're going to be better off.
You're really just presetting. You're
trying to
presetting
preset
where
it
your
back.
sways should be when you hit anyhow that way. It's super easy. And honestly, 90% of the people who are going to watch this video, that's how they should start hitting an iron anyway, is literally with their foot banked in like that or rolled in like that side view camera over here. Put the center of your pelvis at least over the top of the golf ball, and then try not to move it at all, and you'd play better golf. It's not the way I would teach every single person how to swing, and you don't have to do that unless you have a specific problem like not hitting the ground in the right place or chunking your driver. Your follow through looks similar to this with your hip sway too far away from the target. That's about 12 inches further away than it was when I started. That's just not going to work. So you got to stop doing that problem very quickly, even if it's in an unorthodox manner that helps you do it.
And it'd be a great place to start as a beginner as well too.
Absolutely.
Learn how to establish some solid contact and build into the follow through almost like you demonstrated prior to that.
Yep. You got. What was the last one there?
Those are both hip sway, weight shift related questions.
Okay.
So both along the same lines there.
Yeah.
There is one you could probably brush on again here real quick. How do I get rid of my chicken wing? I have a really tough time.
Ooh,
so
the
we'll go along the lines with
chicken
what you
wing.
already talked about, but can maybe add more detail to that?
Is there a sillier name in golf for like a problem that you have? Yeah, you could do the exact same thing. I would still just sum this one up real quick with somebody that every shot that you hit, like this one, I'll hit right here and we'll take a look at the swing. I'm going to hit this shot with a 7-iron. It's going to fly 190 yards or so, and we'll check out my follow-through form. Okay, so watching this one.
There's your 0 degree bend.
Yeah,
back.
you made a good point there. So there's my tour average-ish swing. I'm going to hit this golf ball, and a lot of my swing is very tour average-like. Let's keep going even further than this one, though. Okay, from that front view camera, that's a good spot to stop. Can you zoom in like really close to my right arm there? Now notice how my right arm isn't even flexed at all. I've just hit the golf ball and I've kept my right arm straight. Just scroll this forward even a little bit more. And I'm trying to not bend my right arm at all in this swing. So that's good enough. All the way through that entire shot, I just haven't bent my right arm. Now, I know that going live again, your chicken wing question has to do with your left arm and how you might bend that, or at least that's the connotation I get when you say chicken wing. But by focusing on your right arm and how straight that is, it's going to limit the amount you can actually flex your left at the same time. It's pretty challenging to do both, even on this side of the ball. So first of all, just start with the slow practice swings. I might just practice indoors, hitting the ground, hitting the tee, and keep both of your arms straight. Then start going a little bit faster, hitting the ground harder, and ultimately you're on your way to solving that problem. Do not bend your right arm in the follow-through, especially if you've tried everything else. You need something different. Anything else in there?
Maybe a quick descriptor here. Been told I have a flat shoulder plane. Can you address this issue and then just explain the difference between shoulder bend and shoulder tilt?
Okay.
I think a lot of times you'll hear tilt described as side bend. Is probably where a lot of the confusion comes in.
Okay, I think I got it. Here, I'll just hit a shot. Let's look at the top of that one. So we'll pull out the shoulder tilt number. So that starts at address right there, about 5 degrees to the right. And then at the top of the backswing, the PGA Tour average is 36 to the left. Let's see how I'm doing here, about 42-ish. So I'm tilting to the left a touch more. When you look at all my numbers right there, you'll notice almost all of them are green. My swing is really close to the tour average, even though I don't practice, don't play. I'm just describing as best I can what I see all the best golfers doing. So the picture on the left, I started bent forward at address. Can we do that maybe one more time? We'll talk about that translation. So the right-hand picture, the front side view, 37 degrees forward. From the side view, that is the angle Brad is about to draw. Where you can really see just how I'm bent forward some amount. It's measurable, 37 degrees. If you had a flat shoulder plane, I think is the, whatever the wording was in there, a flat shoulder turn, you would actually do less than that. But for me to keep that same inclined angle, that yellow line that Brad drew on the left picture, go right up to the top, I need to keep myself tilted to the ground in a similar amount to where I started. So I might have started at 34, now I have 42 to the left. That's a little more left than how I would probably tilt, but that's fine. That's how you do it. That's how you make a backswing where your head doesn't change its inclination to the ground. Can you go live one more time? The worst way to try to play golf, and the measurement from our data study that we did before, was the hardest way to play, or a big separator of skill, was to get up to the top of the swing and tilt a minimal amount to the left. The more you tilted to the left, 36 being the PGA Tour average, if you went even a little more than that, chances are it started to make your handicap was lower. So a way you could practice that would be just to stand up by a wall. I'll just use this shaft as an example. If I put up that by my head, shaft or a wall, whatever it is, and then make it backswing all the way to the top where you actually don't raise your head off of that wall. It stays right up against it all the way up to the top of the swing. That'd be the simplest and easiest way to probably learn the skill of how you need to tilt yourself to the left.
And what kind of problems do you typically associate with that? So
Sure.
players that don't left tilt enough?
It's hard to hit the ground. As your head starts to move and your left shoulder moves higher relative to the ground, on the way down you need to start flexing yourself forward to accommodate for that, which is hard to do. Some people flex forward too long,
Start really smashing into the ground.
hit the turf too hard. It also, as you might watch the shaft and the butt end of my club, if I start to tilt to the left, it's far more than the tour average from the top on the way down. It's very easy to start making the shaft, start pushing out higher and higher, and that's eventually just showing you how your swing direction at this point in time is severely to the left of the target, big time slicing. So it's really hard to move your hand path inward and backward, so it's behind you and far enough behind you so that you don't slice. It's hard to move it at one constant angle if you don't tilt yourself to the left while you're turning as well. So this is just a critical part of golf. And the backswing is just so three-dimensional, but so is the rest of the game. And a lot of the time that you're watching golf on TV, you might see or hear a commentator talk about it's just pure rotation, or it's just turning, just turn. Or really good players on the way down. I've heard this a ton of times with Matt Wolf and some of the younger players as well. The talking heads on TV talk about how on the downswing you just turn. That's the most ridiculous and like juvenile way of explaining golf. You need to understand the three-dimensional piece of this to actually be good. And I promise you that in the history of golf, there's never been someone on the downswing or in the follow-through who just turned. They're always bending backward, tilting to the right. Those measurements are always changing. So it's unfortunately, I'd like to say that makes sense, but it's totally silly. And unfortunately, that's also what you guys get to hear when you watch golf on TV, which does lead to another question I'd like to get to someday, which is not today, of how do you watch golf on TV and have it make sense? First thing you do is probably hit mute. I'll save that for a spoiler for another day.
We've got a few club fitting related questions rolling in. You want to take that off and go back to our fireside chat?
Yeah, let's do your shaft side chat.
All right, so I have a couple questions in here to get started.
I saw one on there, which was which irons of 2019 were you most excited to see or best performing?
Yeah, so the ones I'm most excited to see haven't come out yet. Let's talk about best performing first. So G410 from Ping. That's been one of the most forgiving irons. Actually, all the ones that we carry, we've measured them all. It has the highest MOI of anything we've measured, and that just basically means on your off-center strikes, it's going to give you the most predictable results. So if you struggle with directional control or distance control, G410 is at least one to try out. It might not be best, but I would take a look at it. Some of the ones I'm most excited for are sitting on the table here. So they've either just come out or there's even another version of this coming out as well. So TaylorMade just came out with the P790, so a 2019 version of it. And I think this model is going to be really good for your high single-digit handicap. I think the original 790 was an awesome club. It went really far, but I think it was probably a little bigger than the golfer they were really gearing towards. It had a little too much offset. It was a pretty long blade length, and they had a real void between their 760 and 790. It's like they were missing a club almost. Yeah. So I think the new 790 fills that void. You get the performance of the old one, but in a little more compact package. I think a better player would like. And they actually have a 790 Ti version coming out, which I think is going to be awesome.
Is that mine?
I think it's going to be for you. You might even hit it farther than your M5s, so you have more problems. But it's a titanium body, and then all the weight they save, they just put upwards of like 120 grams of tungsten in it. Yeah. So it's a lot, and it's going to be like upwards of a third of the club weight, and that's just going to make it more forgiving, higher launching, everything that you should be looking for in an iron.
If you've watched stuff we've done before, you might notice like the little joke we're telling here of really, let me explain it, of the clubs that I choose. I tend to just pick out the ones that are the biggest, most forgiving and start with those because after watching for a dozen years on the PGA Tour, watching those guys play golf quite often on the range, I'm watching from 10 feet away, seeing guys like the most impressive hitter I've ever watched was Henrik Stenson around 2012 when he was #1 in the world, close to there. And I've never seen someone hit the ball so high and so far with an iron. What you're really trying to do when you select a set of clubs is not play the clubs the best players play. You're trying to play the clubs that will allow you to hit a golf ball like the best players play. And I see too many of them hit the ball too high, too far with these blade irons or something that's just not as forgiving. And that's not really the point. The point isn't play these. It's hit the ball like they do. So even these G410s from Ping, there's a little too much offset. I have a hard time aiming the face far enough to the right to hit a small push draw with it, so it's not quite what I'm after. I'm really after this G410 iron with no offset or even a little bit of onset somebody's going to make this large cavity back club with all the forgiveness that a good golfer can use but doesn't really need. But they're going to make it with the same profile of the offset and the style and the leading edge of a blade, and you're going to have this home run for almost everybody. Maybe not the PGA Tour players because it's too radical for their game. Hitting a pitching wedge 200 yards like what I'm doing right now changes the way that you have to practice and play.
I think a lot of the manufacturers are kind of getting there as well too. Even so, Mizuno just came out with their MP20 line. They have an HMB, so it's hollow, super forgiving. But takes all those qualities you described. So thicker sole, thicker top line. There's your forgiveness typically, but it really does have minimal offset as well too. So if you're like Nick and you like a bigger club but minimal offset, that could be another cool one to check out. And these will go really far.
Here's a question by Rob, and sorry I'm missing a whole bunch of these. There are too many as it is. It says, my son hits the ball very high with his irons, which obviously affects consistency with distance and any suggestions. So first, Rob, your son is hitting with probably too much dynamic loft. That's the loft of the club, and maybe it's the same problem that we saw before. It tends to be that way, where you have the shaft leaning backwards, or somehow you're adding loft as you hit the shot. Spin loft is too high and the ball just doesn't go very far. A good way to practice reducing the amount of dynamic loft that you have is actually focusing how to hit a golf ball with the shaft more forward, but more specifically how you do that. So hitting the shot, the more that you flex your left wrist and actually start to twist the bones in your forearm this way so that your forearm actually starts pointing up at the sky when you hit. I'll just use this one dimension, but the more that you hit this way, the easier it is to reduce the loft. And you can see how on that club I don't even really have a whole lot anyway. So hitting a shot with whatever backswing you want, I think it's still easier to start short. Hit the golf ball with your left wrist flexed like that, and aim your left forearm up at the sky to close the face, and punching the ball all the way into the follow-through, like more or less how I just demonstrated it in there. From this view, if you were looking at me hitting a shot towards that camera, this would be a great way to practice how to flex your wrist, uncock your wrist, or this ulnar deviation where the shaft actually lowers to the ground, and aim your forearm, as much of the top of your forearm as you can, straight up at the sky. That's a good way to start teaching yourself how to hit with less loft, less spin loft, and hit lower shots. Starting slow, punching some shots, and then ultimately going a little faster, still trying to have that same form in the follow-through. So many of these problems that are on this page right here and that come through all the time, you can learn the skills of how to get impact really usable by learning how your follow-through should work when your right arm is parallel to the ground. That's a great way for anyone who slices or has a hard time even hitting the turf to practice. I say that mainly because if you do this really well in the follow-through, your odds of hitting the ball with a very unique and unusable position, like the shaft back or your left wrist extended, left elbow bent, and then still having a flexed left wrist, ulnar deviated shaft, and the toe of the club pointing up like that, it's just not even doable. That's what it can almost answer every single question on here with the same advice if you wanted just a generic answer. Could answer these all 50 different ways too, but that's a good, easy one for everyone to understand.
I think I have an even easier solution as well too. It'd be as simple as just checking out the clubs you're using also. I mean, a big part of going through a fitting is making sure that your clubs aren't part of the problem, and at least you have peace of mind and working on as Nick describes. But all these different irons, they're all 7 irons. They're going to launch the ball probably 4, maybe upwards of even 5 degrees different launch angles just because of the way they're designed. So not knowing anything about obviously what Rob's son there is using, but having the right shaft, having the right head for them, be just one of the easiest things to do first, and then you can get into the everything swing related as well.
And especially if your son Rob is a serious golfer, it's worth checking out all of his clubs. Like if you really want to make sure you're doing it right all the way through it, it doesn't just stop with your swing technique. You have to have clubs that fit you well enough and that aren't really holding back your game, which is what we're trying to do all the time.
Because he mentions it specifically with the irons as well too. We'll assume maybe driver's okay. It just makes me think that something about club head design especially, and even something shaft maybe, too light, too soft, is something that could play a role.
Yep, and Elliot, you're really talking about the same thing. If you want to couple anything else into there, I might tell you just make the tiniest little swings. Feel like you punch the ground as hard as you can, forget about your swing direction. So if it's aimed 20 degrees to the left, that's fine, but make a divot that is in front of wherever you would hypothesize the ball being. So a simple way to do that is just take your club or your foot, grind a line in the ground, and you're going to practice a really tiny swing and smash on the turf in front of the ball. And if you practice the follow through that we just explained for Rob too, that'll take you a long way too. But you can do these problems, and there's so many multiple solutions for all of them. Simple ones, though, are just understanding how to do the follow-through.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's a couple other fitting ones in here. Helen, the simple question of just how many shots should you hit during a fitting or when you're testing the club? We always go for 4 shots. I think it's a good representation of just what's actually going to happen when you're actually on the course. If you're sitting there hitting 10, 20 shots, you're eventually going to find that one that works, but that just isn't how golf works. We're looking at your one best shot. It's a great way to sell equipment, but really looking at like the median would be the way to get a true representation of how this club would perform on the course when you get one shot and then it counts.
You got it. And then let me go elaborate on that a little more, like different level golfers, tour players. I've seen, I don't know, dozens of tour players get handed a golf club from an OEM manufacturer, and it's a brand new one. It's the latest and greatest model. They hit it 3 times and can tell you right away, I don't like that one. We're using the same sort of fitting methodology for us. If you can't hit a driver after 3 or 4 swings reasonably well, that probably isn't for you, and something of the other thousands of combos we can make is
you're
better.
You're gonna tend to try to adapt as well to try to make it work, and then like you're saying, it's just not a good representation of what you do actually out there on the course. There was a fun wedge-related one down here I thought as well too. If you want to maybe start on that one, where'd it go? So there we go. Main reason for hitting thin rocket launching wedges. I'm thinking 50, 58 degree wedges. Find it difficult to get the leading edge and that tight spot behind the ball.
Okay.
So
short
thin
shots?
rocket launching, I think he's talking about shots probably 40, 50 yards maybe.
So hitting them like a groove thin? Is that what you're
It sounds
saying?
like he's hitting
groove
2.
low?
1 groove thin could be really good. I think these are 2 grooves low.
Yeah.
You start on that one to grab a wedge.
Okay. There might be one in there.
I got a couple options back here.
Gotcha. So different ways to actually hit a wedge shot I would start with, since he's grabbing that. Well, you're hitting the leading edge of the club into the equator of the golf ball. Easy to see since I've chopped this one up. It's not actually making it up onto the grooves of the wedge. So something you need to actually allow the sole of the club to engage with the ground. Then you can get enough of the golf ball onto the club face itself to kick this thing up into the air. What's your demo? What do you got there?
So we've just 2 58 degrees with varying degrees of bounce. I think we've talked about this before as well too, but one of the common problems I always see with just your average golfers, they typically don't have enough bounce on their wedges. So there's some technique in there related to just knowing how to use the wedge as you're describing. But if you have, say, a lob wedge at 58 degree here, we have 2 options. One only has 4 degrees of bounce, then the other one has 14. So it's pretty much both ends of the spectrum. I would always err towards having too much. So what the bounce is just how much this trailing edge is sitting below the leading edge, be your simple way of thinking of it. And that's just going to be your forgiveness. Because what you're trying to do is really not get the leading edge to hit the ground behind the ball, as they're describing there. You actually want to get middle of the sole or even the trailing edge to hit even just behind the ball, right under the ball. That bounce is going to be your insurance policy. It'll make the bad shot's still pretty usable. So off a really tight lie, having bounce is typically your friend.
So summing that one up, open the club face, get a wedge with a lot of bounce.
Add more bounce.
Yep. So now the club won't dig into the ground, and then don't be afraid to hit it. And then I see far too many people trying to hit their wedges with the heel of the club into the turf first. If anything, you want to err on the side of hitting the toe, digging in the back edge of the club like you can see on that particular shot. It's not anything you do to avoid the leading edge is important to hit all these 40 or 50 yard pitch shots.
And there's some cool ones coming out recently. TaylorMade has their new Bigfoot. It's got 15 degrees of bounce. I was checking out another manufacturer over the weekend. Saw one that actually had 27 degrees of bounce. It's the highest I've ever seen in person.
Right.
Looked fun though. So if you're going to err on the high side when it comes to bounce.
Okay, Blake's got a question here. What is y'all's opinion of excessive forearm rotation in the backswing leading to the club face being open? So what he's really describing is at the top of the swing. I'll take the motion of the swing away, but look at me right down the line camera. Turn your forearm a lot, extend your left wrist, and then you can see how the toe of the club is really just angled down. That would be the easiest way, I think, of what we're defining as the face angle too open. That is the worst way to play golf. Now, let me explain how that works from here, though. On the downswing, PGA Tour players ever so slightly flex their left wrist on average on the way down, which closes the face. And then as they approach the ball, before they hit and into the follow through, the left wrist starts to extend, pretty typical. Meanwhile, the amateurs open the face too many degrees on the backswing, and then on the downswing open it more, or extend their left wrist even more degrees, opening the face more, and then approach the ball and extend their left wrist even more, which basically turns you into that scissor analogy we did earlier. They're always just flicking the ball up into the air this way. So if you're guilty of doing something like that, I'd suggest in the backswing, when the shaft's parallel to the ground, that you try to actually make a swing where your club face looks like this, aim straight down. Couple that with making sure you turn your lead arm or your left wrist, like I am right here, on top of the club more degrees. So don't hold the club onto the side as much. Turn your hand on top. Aim the club face down at, when the shaft's parallel to the ground. Aim the club face back at the camera like you see here, or back away from your target. And then at the top of the swing, don't be afraid to find a muse like Jordan Spieth, Dustin Johnson, John Rahm, all those guys who'd beat you in a cage match, and how their left wrist is actually flexed at the top, and now you notice the club face angle's in a very different position. So the more you extend your left wrist, the more that you twist open the shaft, the more the club face just opens on the backswing, not necessary. If anything, you're always better to flex your left wrist. Couple that with another way of thinking about it, same thing, is just to flex your right wrist more. Start more at address, keep it flexed in the backswing, and keep it flexed as much as you can all the way up to the top of the swing.
The funny one here.
What do you got?
One from, where'd it go there, with Jan.
Are you nervous at all? I'm going to hit you with a club, by the way.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I know it wouldn't hurt very much.
Yeah.
Let's go, I like Roberts here. Will certain clubs make you swing from the inside easier, and if not, best way to swing from the inside with every club?
Gotcha.
So a little bit of a twofold question there in regards to club fitting.
Why don't you start with the club?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and get the motion capture back on. I've tested a number of different clubs, and there's some different shafts out there that will have some different balance points, different weights. I haven't seen anything when you actually look at objective data that's going to create a significant difference of swing direction, of being more in to out. Anything that would change, I would say, is typically just the human element. Anything to change your swing direction is going to be pretty much all up to you, and that's going to be how you swing the club. Nick's getting set up in there. Probably a couple of easy things we can talk about to make it easier to swing in to out. You have an iron in your hands, or you want to try out with the driver?
Well, I've got an iron, so let's just do that.
Okay, roll the iron. And get you lined up here as well.
I think it's probably, yeah, I'm good.
Good?
Good, yeah. Okay, easy way to do it. First, looking down at the ground, right here. Got this foam noodle. If I did swing across the ball, I'd start smashing into that. Now, indoors, that's an easy thing to do, especially since I've got a lot of valuable gear here, like the $20,000 launch monitor. That's a good place to start. If you're outside, you could use a head cover. If you were outside and I had to teach golf all day on a driving range, I might put like a big cooler right here, something that was plastic, but you could hit it and it wouldn't cause any kind of injury. So fill it with ice, take the beer out. I know you have that in there from last week's football games, but that would be a simple way to do it. Now, another way that I'm looking at this from the side view camera is how this is on just an ever so slight angle. It's not straight, it's not angled away from me, but there's enough room on the backswing for me to miss it. And if I swing slightly to the right, I'll miss it on the way through too. You practice like that all the time. Now, the part on the motion that Brad really wanted to see was the amount that my shoulders are turned. So it's that third number down. At address, the more that I turn my shoulders to the right, like in that one you can see I'm aimed about 1 or 2 degrees closed, 3 degrees closed. That's the angle that I'm angling the sensor to the right. Ever so slightly close to the target, that sets up my swing direction to be to the right. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it, but it is a really good start to that. Most people, and you can separate this one into handicap, the more that you open your shoulders more and more and more and more, the more that's predisposing you to slicing across the ball, even though it's at address. So while good golfers have learned to accommodate that, you might even watch PGA Tour players who overdraw, and you might notice that they actually set up with their left forearm a little bit below their right, like I am in that left picture, or their shoulders are open closer to 20 degrees, like I'm using here as an example. They're using that so that they don't swing to the right too much. So that's a really good start. And you can practice just with practice swings first, but tiny swings to get started. Let's hit this one and I'll show you a simple way to make that work. Okay. Get into this one and review it. On backswing. Pay attention to that side view. Okay, at address, my shoulders are open a little bit on the backswing. Here's a point in time where my hands are even with my belt buckle. Notice how I would cover those right up. Finish that arrow off, about like that. Not worried about the angle of the shaft. This is sometimes where people start getting very concerned first. First step of swinging to the right of the target, or this way, is to not dwell on whether or not your shaft angle or your face angle is exactly perfect or wherever you want it. If anything, you want to go too far in and close the face too much. Then on the way down, when the shaft's parallel to the ground, the shaft's always to the left of my hands, and we can just play a little game of connect the dots here. This will be fun. Let's do it this way. I'll draw a line on the club head. Let's go down a few frames. Do that again. Down a little bit more. Here's one more. You can see the angle of the club head's actually swinging on here. There's impact. And then let's go just a touch more into the follow through, something like this. Now connect all those dots and you have the actual angle more or less that I'm trying to swing on and play golf on. Something like that. A little more unique way to actually draw what just happened. If you slice all the time, you'll smash into that piece of foam, you'll hit the cooler, you'll smash right into your head cover that you've laid there. That's a good way to start. So you might notice like a lot of these little ways I'm explaining this are to start small. The reason a lot of people have all these questions is because they're trying to fix their problems at full speed or not changing things enough. By making smaller swings this way, you're really isolating the problem that you've got into the really tiny parts that is that you make these errors. Don't make full swings trying to go very fast when you're changing things. Start small.
So a couple of...
Good time for maybe one or two more.
Yeah, I have a short game related one
Okay.
here. Came in a little bit earlier from Greg.
Right.
So when chipping, so zoom, say right around the green,
Mhm.
do you prefer to fly the ball to the hole or roll the ball to the hole, and
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
I think you probably have to have both of those shots in your bag, but say a standard issue shot, I'm typically going to try to fly it most of the way.
Yeah.
I think you're eliminating a lot of variables that way as well too, just the breaks in the green.
Yes.
To manage a lot
Yes.
less.
Well, most people can't read a green anyway.
It makes it difficult to
So-
play a bump and run.
Yeah, and that old adage of if I'm hitting a shot from here to the camera, that if that's the edge of the green and then I want to roll it a long way, to try to do that, I mean, no one practices that shot.
Mhm.
So to then say that's what you should be doing because it keeps the ball closest to the ground and then it rolls a long way. I mean, in theory, I can sort of understand that, but it's totally missing the point of you hit the shots on the course that you practice the most often and that you're actually good at. So even if I have to hit a 30-yard shot with a wedge that goes high and lands soft, and I normally can do that, that's the shot you hit, even if there's a bunch of green that's wide open in front of you. People can't read greens anyway, so trying to bump something on the green, even if you did hit it in the right spot, the spot you thought, now you've got to take into account that you've read the green real well to get a good shot too. You have too many variables in there. It's the same old adage of the pin's on the right, you want to hit a little slice into that one, the pin's on the left, you want to draw it in. No. You want to hit the same shot
hit
every
the shot
time
you always hit, right?
that you know will end up where you want.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of that just comes from the idea it's a much shorter swing, so the
Yeah.
idea there's less to mess up in the actual swing, which there might be some truth to that, but then the variables maybe you're eliminating here, then you're just adding them to the rest of the shot. So.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. That's good for you. Nice job.
Hey, I try my best.
Yeah,
Sometimes I get one.
Stop hitting little chip shots with your 7-iron around the green unless you're really good at it and you spend a bunch of time practicing it. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. What else? You see something else in there?
Roll through, see if there's anything else good.
Chicken wings.
Got that one.
We had something else. The question about why do PGA Tour players tend to favor a fade.
Mhm.
Do you remember that one?
Yep.
I keep looking for another question. I'll
Sure.
answer that one real quick. First, here's the problem with watching PGA Tour players hit again. So first, I described it with an iron when talking about this ping iron of how watching PGA Tour players, they hit the ball very high, very far. Don't worry about the curve to get started. They hit it very high and very far. When you have that, and you have that ball speed, and you have that amount of club head speed, and you play golf like that, it doesn't matter which way you curve the ball nearly to the same level that it does if you cannot hit a shot that way. The golfers that come into us all the time have a huge problem with spin loft. They use way too much with all of their clubs. So swinging slow and slicing because you have too much spin loft or you're hitting your driver like a bunker shot is the quick and dirty analogy there. That is the worst way to play. So don't worry that Brooks Koepka hits fades. Brooks Koepka also hits his driver 350 yards into the fairway. That's what you should be worrying about and trying to do. When you have that much ball speed, the worst shot you can hit is the way Dustin Johnson tried to play for a long time and was very successful. He would try to draw every shot. Sometimes they'd curve like 50 yards with his driver right to left. So big pushes, big draws. Well, if you hit the ball in the toe of the club at that point for Dustin, he's got so little spin on the shot that now those balls are hooking more than he's used to, and they're flying very, very short. What he's chosen to do instead on most of his shots now is err the other way, so that if he mishits a shot while trying to curve the ball to the right, but puts too much spin on it, which is what would happen if he over curves one to the right or slices too much, plays a fade too many degrees and makes a mistake, that ball just hangs up into the air and doesn't travel too far offline. It still actually goes farther. I mean, when you have that kind of ball speed, you can afford to err on the side of too much spin loft, too much backspin. A shot that would normally go 330 into the middle of the fairway, if struck really well, goes 285 into the right rough. That's not a penalty, you know. But meanwhile, our average guys who come in to see us, who hit their driver 200 yards and then make a mistake and overslice one and only hit it 150 yards and it's way to the right of the fairway, that's a penalizing shot.
And I think Dustin's a good example to talk about that as well too, because if you look at Dustin back when he drew the ball and Dustin when he fades it, his swing, it's almost the exact same thing, right? He's aiming the face a little bit different and just aligning himself, say, different in address, but just how he's swinging the club isn't much different, which brings back to your point. Everyone who walks in our doors, though, and they hit a slice, just the way they swing the club is vastly different than Brooks, than DJ.
So my main point in there is don't copy the curve of the ball. Try to copy the launch, how far it goes, how it lands on the ground. That's how you can get the most out of your game. Did you find one? You were trying to read for like 5 minutes.
Well, you kept talking.
Now you lost it? Okay. There were some other ones on there. Favorite movie? Or what was better, Caddyshack or Happy Gilmore?
I know I'm probably going to be in the minority.
It's because you're wrong.
I'm going to go Happy Gilmore, but I think that typically I saw that one first growing up, so I'm sure I'm in the minority on that one.
Right.
You going to answer the question?
No. Don't really care.
An old guy like you?
Caddyshack is obviously the best one, so I can't get that
more
right.
just came in here.
Yeah, I struggle with a quick transition at the top. Any thoughts or drills to promote a smoother transition? You want to take that one?
Sorry, I was reading the one below you. Why don't you take it?
All right, I got it. So if you struggle with a quick transition, I might have a problem with the terms and the definitions there first, but on the way down, you're probably not moving the shaft from the top of the swing down too fast. If you were, man, Tiger Woods and Dustin Johnson and John Rahm, all those guys who'd beat you up in a cage match, they would really have a hard time because they're doing it faster than you are. What you're probably doing is maybe misdiagnosing the problem of which way you're actually pushing the shaft, and a lot of people from the top of the swing push the butt end of the club out too far at the beginning of slicing across the ball. That's likely the problem. What I would suggest that you do, if anything, would be to feel like you keep your shoulders closed to the target, keep your back to the target, and just drop the butt end of the club downward, slightly towards the ball, if anything. But you have to avoid the feeling of turn yourself open, push the butt end of the club out. That's the biggest problem in golf right there.
I think along those same lines of people that feel like they have a quick transition, it's typically just not closing your turns long enough in the backswing, so maybe they just don't close their hips enough, closing their hips more in the backswing, closing their shoulders more in the backswing. I think just goes along with what you're saying there as well.
Yeah. And sorry to say it that way, but it's true. It's that is such a common and dogmatic thing that you've probably heard so many times. Boy, you just got quick on that one. You just swung too fast on that shot. Those are never actually the problems that people have. There is something along the way that you moved or what you did with the shaft itself and the direction that you tried to pull that thing on the way down that causes the problem. That's where you need some more help than just listening to your friends or maybe even taking a guess. It's time for some serious coaching help from an expert who does this for a living at that point in time. If you feel like that problem is really yours, I bet it's not. There's a measurable problem like what we continue to demonstrate every time we do one of these, of measuring swings and talking about why the data can help drive good decision making.
We probably have one last question and then a special request as well. But
Okay.
So next question: theory behind choking down on the club shaft.
Yeah.
Is it to get better distance control or less overall distance, or just better better control in general?
Yeah.
'Cause you're typically talking only choking down ½ inch, maybe an inch at most, is probably all the grip you actually have. It's not going to have a significant change in how fast you can actually swing.
Right.
It's really going to be more about just controlling where you hit on the club face, and then through that, by hitting in the middle, you can have some predictability to how far the ball does go. So I'd say it's more of a control and then a consistency, if you want a consistency of your distance control, if you want to call it that. I mean, you're going to see a significant distance change by choking down.
No,
Do you think?
a small amount, but you think it has anything to do with the way you're effectively almost counterbalancing the shaft at all? Could have something to do with it?
I think you're reaching on that one.
I know I'm reaching.
You're
That's the
going-
whole point.
You're going to the very bottom of the totem pole on that one, I
It is.
think.
I'm going with just holding the club a little bit lower on the shaft is just making it that much easier to hit the center of the face.
That's why you
Shorter
hit your
clubs are
wedge
better.
more solid than your 3-iron.
Correct. The shaft is shorter. It's just easier to manage. So I see no problem with that. A lot of people can play golf that way. There are tour players who even will grip down on the shaft a ½ an inch or 1 whole inch. I've seen many of them just play golf like that.
Yep.
It's fine. Who cares? Worry about the bigger and more important things.
All right, one final request, or you're going to try one more question?
I already see the one. Nope, go ahead. Let's do one more, then we're getting out of here. 55 minutes is enough time to listen to you
All right.
ramble.
One final question. Any preferences in here?
Nice, thanks. How's GOLFTEC choose instructors? I got this. You're just slowing this thing down. These people are trying to watch something.
I'm trying to find the ones we didn't answer yet.
How does GOLFTEC choose its instructors? Well, I mean, we have 800 coaches across the world. We are opening new locations all the time. We always need more instructors, mainly because that growth rate in our business itself is just going is through the roof right now. So to keep up with all that growth, we're always looking for more people. Preferably, we'd love to have people who have experience and who love teaching golf and love helping people. And then we just try to integrate what you've already taught as a coach with the motion measurement data that we capture in every lesson and show a really simple system of how to help people play better and then integrate those two. So it's about taking whatever a coach comes to us with and then real world data and facts to help give the best lessons you can, and then we give you thousands of reps to practice it. Would love to have PGA members. Those are the most significant and most influential people in the industry, and they tend to have the passion and the love to help people in their community play better and enjoy the game. So, I mean, that's really what we're after. But beyond that, I think if you want to check that out, golftech.com/careers is the place where you can apply to be a coach, or if you're even at all interested, it's worth just getting in that process and talking to some people on our end just to see if it's a good fit for you. Hopefully that one was good. What is golf? Great question. If you've made it this far, chances are you probably know what golf is. All right, last one. I see it down here. I know you're just dying to ask.
Is that, wish you had an accent? Can you
Wish
do
you had
something
an
about that?
accent. Could you do
If I had to
something about it?
guess what kind of accent, I would say a pirate personally,
That's the
but
one. Maybe people want to see this stuff where I talk like a pirate.
Yep.
I'm just happy to
did
almost
you bring your eye patch?
over this cold that I have right now. That's
Right,
hard enough to
you
breathe.
sound halfway there today.
Yeah, getting better. Yes, I could talk like a pirate, but I don't know. People have brought that up. Like the Golf Channel guys even say, "Man, you could do this show, and so many more people would."
It just
would
makes you
watch
sound
if
so much smarter.
Spoke like you were Scottish or something.
I think you have to tune in after hours maybe to get the pirate rendition.
Sorry, I'm a 41-year-old American. I can't do a whole lot about that one. From the Midwest, it's making it even worse to have an accent like that.
One more really relevant question. Anchorman or old school?
Anchorman.
I want you
old
to answer.
school.
I can follow it up, but I want you to start.
Both of those are
My story's a
classics.
little longer.
I'll go with Anchorman.
You're
can
gonna go
finish this
Anchorman?
off. I'm done. Yeah.
I would go Anchorman today. When I saw them in
This is
theaters,
great.
I would have gone old school. I didn't think Anchorman was funny when I first saw it.
Yeah.
But now, in hindsight, I'm definitely going to go Anchorman.
That's fine, just to be wrong. Hey, check this one out. Can you get in a little closer on these? We keep chopping up all these golf balls. Let me show you a few of them. So we've been doing this for years. It's nothing different. But I'll show you a few of these. Don't hit range balls. They're made of this tiny, tiny, ugly, nasty cover, and this is hard as a rock inside of that. You got a pretty good view of that one, Scott? Nice. What you're looking for are golf balls that have some sort of multi-layer construction, thinner covers that still last a long time. These are really good golf balls. And then don't buy the ones that I showed you here earlier, like this one. So the only way to be sure that you're not playing a golf ball like this, cut it apart and then glue it back together. That's
You
my
should
advice
really
for today.
match the core of the golf ball to your attire for that day.
All right,
Here,
close
that works
enough.
best.
I think we're good for today. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, you are a real trooper. You want to get good at golf. Keep following us on social media. We're trying to put out some wild and crazy stuff here that you're going to see a whole lot more here in a couple months. Anything else you want to say?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for
Good
tuning
enough.
in, and we
See
can
ya.
answer some questions afterward.